Yeah, so welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today for another Aquaculture Information Exchange webinar. For those of you not familiar with our platform, we are the all-in-one platform for the American aquaculture community. We were started through a NOAA USDA-backed grant with the goal of creating an online space for the American aquaculture community. I will drop a link to our website. If you're not registered on there, I encourage you to do so. We have almost 2,000 members on there right now. You don't have to be from America to register, but that's sort of the intended community. We have a growing catalog of educational courses on there, as well as a very vibrant job board. So yeah, hope y'all will register on there, and you can stay updated with the upcoming AI webinars. We're putting together some workforce development panels as well in the next couple of months, so keep an eye out for those. But with that, yeah, I would just remind everybody to stay on mute if you're not Dylan. But yeah, I want to introduce Dylan Howell from Hatch Blue. He's the operations and development manager for the Americas for Hatch Blue. And Hatch Blue is a leading supporter and investor in early stage aquaculture entrepreneurs. We've been excited to have them on our platform. I think this is a very timely conversation to be having when it comes to aquaculture funding, as far as the past, present, and future opportunities. So, with that, Dylan, if you want to take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. And thanks for having us. And really happy to be here to sort of create more awareness around your platform, and hoping that this, session today will encourage folks to go and register on the Aquaculture Exchange, Information Exchange platform, and really find a community there, because it's, that is the place to go today to connect with other folks on in the industry in aquaculture. So I will start. My talk was probably going to be around 20 minutes. I'm also happy to sort of do sort of interactive. So if you do have a question sort of halfway, feel free. Otherwise, we'll try to keep all the questions till the end. This presentation, or at least the recording of this presentation, will be available for you to review afterwards. And if you're just joining now, I'll leave my contact information and my Google Calendar link, so that you can all find time to speak to me if you're interested. Okay, great. So the point, also the topic today, is really to talk about funding in aquaculture. Those of you who don't know Hatch, or if not familiar with Hatch, we are a venture capital firm. Most of these firms are regarded as sort of as sharks in terms of investors, but that's really not at all what we do. We do impact investing, and I'll take you through what Hatch is about and what we do. So let me see if I can. Joe, is that working now? My presentation?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, it
great.
looks like it.
So it's a very timely to have this presentation, since obviously the funding environment is a little bit rocky at the moment. I think everyone can agree with that, especially for aquaculture, since we are at a time where food security and local production in America is critical, but also aquaculture is a fairly new industry compared to other food production industries, and the rate of change and adoption of technologies is critical to keep up with the needs of society in terms of how fast we work. And the rate at which we farm today is not necessarily going to be the way our next generation of folks that are they don't want to farm the way we farmed today or yesterday or even in the past. So we have to sort of adapt with the environment, especially around human needs, and of course the animal needs. So as everyone knows, we're extremely dependent on imports in America, and those local production has drastically decreased, unfortunately. But there's not to say we can't change that and improve the efficiencies and how we produce seafood in America. Now, if you can look at along the supply chain, most of the value is generated after harvest, down in the downstream value chain, where seafood as a whole, regardless of where it comes from, generally creates about a $330 billion for the economy. Whilst at the farm level and actually at the ocean level, that value is significantly smaller, if not close to 10 times less in what it creates at the end of the value chain. Okay, moving on. So in terms of our consumption, we as Americans do consume a fraction amount of seafood compared to land animals. And this is really a good opportunity for folks in the industry to see how much, even if we increase, our proportion by, half a pound, that could mean significant impact on not only the American economy from an aquaculture or seafood standpoint, but also from a health standpoint. If we can get more people to eat seafood and less protein, that would be fantastic for the health of the country. And most people don't know that the majority of seafood that's consumed in America is farmed. Although it's typically not advertised in the wholesale and retail markets. So today we're going to focus on funding for innovations and aquaculture in terms of what Hatch has done in the past, what we're doing now, and what the current status of affairs are. So just a little bit about me. I've been in the industry on and off commercially and academically since about 2004. I've traveled the world visiting a ton of farms, and I'm actively sort of scoping out where people farm, who they are, what they do, to what capacity, where they fit in the supply chain. And I'm a bit of an addict when it comes to that. So even if my free time, I'm consistently mapping out the ecosystem and figuring out, how do we contact them and how do we collaborate with them. So yeah, this is just a small footprint of where I've been. So in terms of funding, if you're not familiar, if you come from the academic sector, especially in science, well, we're typically not trained on finance and commerce. But from a financing standpoint, you get two different funding mechanisms. It's obviously public funding and private funding. And today we'll focus on private funding, but I will leave a link in the chat box to an amazing resource that Noah has put together. I'll leave that in the chat box at the end, where you can look at typical funding from the government. Okay. So in terms of venture capital, typically venture capital is traditional funding where you would supply money to vendors or companies in exchange for equity. Then you also have patient capital, which is more or less in our box, where we don't necessarily need to have a return immediately. Versus venture capital, they expect to get returns anywhere between 3 and 5 years of investing in your company. Whilst patient capital is more or less the lines of like maybe 8 to 10 years. And that's kind of where our money fits in from our investors. Just to create awareness on how much money is flowing in the economy, at least in America, from a venture capital standpoint, just in the last, I think it was about 7 years between 2006 and 2023, the venture capitalists injected about $1.4 trillion into the businesses in America. That's a lot of money if anyone's counting. Um, and from an industry standpoint, if you look from which sectors are funded the most, obviously biotech, health tech, fintech, and consumer, internet industries, these are heavily funded. Whilst aquaculture is sort of sitting down here, fortunately and unfortunately, but that's always room for opportunity. And luckily, these markets are not saturated with investors, so it's sort of easier to invest in. Okay, a little bit about Hatch. We are a company that started in 2007 with the sole purpose to catalyze in innovation and invest in innovation across the world, where we believe, the future of seafood is going to come from aquaculture, and potentially alternative seafood, those being plant-based or cell-based seafood. These the purpose of Hatch is really to try to foster an ecosystem where more innovation and investment can come in and support entrepreneurs. Where are we based? We have offices all over the world in Singapore and Bergen, Germany, Ireland, and Hawaii. And then we have a few staff scattered around the world. And this is sort of, these dots represent the companies and people that we've are supporting from a investment or program standpoint. Okay, in terms of how Hatch is set up and strategically, and what's the best way to have? So these 4 business units that we've created collaborate in a way that best foster innovation and investment into the industry. So we first and foremost have our investments unit. They manage all the money. We have our consulting unit, our entrepreneurial programs unit, and then finally our media and publishing unit. These units, as I said, sort of work together, where our investment units are actively managing 3 funds. They have a lot of money left to still deploy, and we actively are raising more capital to go into those funds. And so to date, we've managed to support around over 70 companies all around the world. We've run these entrepreneurial programs since 2018, and this to date, at least till the end of this year, we should be reaching around 30 programs. And these are divided between, equity investment programs and free programs. And I'll explain the difference between those in a bit. And then we have our consulting unit, which, supplies a bespoke service to big corporates, much bigger investors, and banks and corporate multi-conglomerate companies all around the world, including a few startups. And then finally, if some of you recognize this logo, we acquired this company in 2019 to support the extension of this business, and also we help sort of advertise more innovation across the world, not only within Hatch, but across the entire industry. Okay, so this is our wonderful team, and it's growing. I believe we've hired at least 5 or 6 people since this picture was taken last year. And I'm really happy to have, worked in this company. In fact, I was the first full-time employee about 7 years ago. And it's an amazing to see how we've grown. So how and where do we support the industry? We started the company with a small budget, where we were able to invest in enabling technologies across the supply chain, where these small businesses could really utilize and capitalize on the investment that we gave them to support many stakeholders, and mostly farmers themselves. Whilst today we are expanding our investment thesis, into the wider supply chain, sort of down the supply chain and up the supply chain. Okay, And then, sorry, just the significance of this map is really just to show that how many people are all involved in the industry. And those of you who were at the conference in New Orleans would have recognized that you maybe have seen this slide before on the plenary talk that John Hargraves gave. So the 10 areas that we are focusing our investments on is, novel and next generation production technologies or methodologies. These typically, represent the RAS systems around the world or technologies that go into RAS farms, digital and software technology, logistics and supply chains, insurance, novel ingredients that go into feed, like vaccines and potential probiotics, prebiotics, genetic tools, cell-based and plant-based seafood. And then we have a new blue carbon markets that we are heavily focused on today. And then, your pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, or any marine biotech technology that are coming into the industry. And then finally, the regenerative aquaculture systems like seaweed and such. Okay, so moving on to the financial topic, who are the public or the NGOs and foundations that have supported aquaculture in the past and still to today. These are just a small snapshot of some of the associations, and we are actively working with many of these in collaboration. In terms of the public funding, there are, so this is the guide I mentioned earlier. I'll drop a link to this, and please feel free to take a screenshot of this if you want, but I will send a link to this in the chat box. Innovation, at least from a US funding standpoint, is funded through the small business, it's the SBIR programs, that has been very successful in building businesses and small businesses in America. And this is just a quick snapshot of how the funding is, deployed between these 9 agencies or 10 agencies. Whilst majority of 2/3 of the 3 billion that's deployed, it goes into Department of Defense. And only about 3 million of the 3 billion goes into the EPA, which is not a great sign from an environmental standpoint, but I guess that's how this country works. And unfortunately, most of the aquaculture innovation that's funded through the SBIR comes from the DOE, the NSF, Department of Ag, and Department of Commerce. Unfortunately, most, if not all, of this funding has been on pause, but within the last, I think, 2-3 weeks, we've had heard news that some of this funding is coming back online. So I would be very hopeful for most of you, if depending on the department that you're targeting, just keep an eye out, and I would be more hopeful than not. In terms of private institutions, this is a small subset of about 200 investors that we are keeping track of, and typically we invest and co-invest in when we invest slightly later stage in our Series A investments. We like to co-invest with other investors, so we keep a good track of which other investors are out there. But this is just a small subsample of for you to see who the main investors are that have invested in aquaculture in the past and still today. There are smaller pre-seed companies. So Hatch started as a accelerator investor where we would make pre-seed and seed investments, and since then we've grown our company to allow sort of later stage investments. Most of these companies are not specialized in aquaculture at all. In fact, Hatch is the only company or VC in the world that is highly focused and specialized in aquaculture, whilst the other companies are sort of sector agnostic, or they sort of spread their investments over a wide array of different ocean-related activities or agriculture activities. And then, of course, you have the banks, which have a different type of money. Okay, the next couple of slides is just a really important lesson here to understand, what makes innovation work and how dependent you should be or can be on the ecosystem and all the different types of stakeholders that make innovation and the adaptation development of innovation in the industry a success. As I showed you earlier in the previous slide, there is a ton of people that makes the world go round, especially in the aquaculture industry. And please be aware, if you're an innovator or you're starting a business, you need to recognize that you have a lot of people in the ecosystem that can support you. And there's not just, competitors or folks that have it out to get you or compete with you. There's lots of people involved that are really there to support you, depending on where they are in the supply chain. And so these stakeholder sort of groups, they all have a mission to develop the industry. And I encourage you guys or those on the call to make a note of some of these companies that are sort of in it to win it and all have the ambition to help people get access to better seafood in long term. I'll just skip through some of these slides. You can see them in the recording, and most of these images are available online. This is a quick snapshot of some of the other investors that we're connected to, some of them, but these are companies that are investing in sort of nature tech, which is quite similar to aquaculture. So if you're looking for other types of money or money from different types of investors that are familiar with nature-based aquaculture or nature tech, then I would encourage you to go through some of these investors. Likewise for climate tech, this is a good snapshot. Okay, so what type of funding or how much funding has gone into aquaculture just in the last few years? This is a quick snapshot of the jurisdictions or regional investments. Whilst you see a lot of money went into Asia in 2023, whilst very few, not a lot of money went into Asia in 2024. I don't know exactly why that was. I know there was a big investment in 2023, but I'm not sure why there's very little investment in 2024. I think my team could probably update this. But if there's the names of the people who made this graph, so feel free to reach out to them on the Hatch website. You can find their profiles in LinkedIn or online. Okay. Whilst in Norway makes the majority of the investments in 2024. In terms of the types of investments, in terms of stage and age and the size of these rounds, most by volume went into seed investments. So these are into startups, whilst from a volume standpoint, or quantity, sorry, quantity went into seed, whilst volume went into Series D. As you can imagine, these deals are much larger, maybe fewer, but more money going into bigger companies. Okay, moving on. In terms of the number of deals in going into different types of investments, we've seen a lot of money going into nutritional companies and regenerative aquaculture, which is really interesting and exciting for everyone. And then obviously next generation farming, which makes up the RAS or modern land-based aquaculture. Okay, in terms of how much money, most of that money has gone into these land-based RAS systems, whilst and then nutrition gets the next bulk of that. And then what else is interesting here? So I think, this was interesting to see how much money went into software in 2003. And I think this is probably the e-fishery investment from a few large institutional investors. Okay, so how does Hatch invest our money? We everyone wants to grow their company from nothing through, IPO, or to raise or grow a large company where they can employ, lots of people and generate jobs and create that impact. And the way to do that is to scale your business along, the stages of your company. Um, and there's different types of funding that's available throughout that journey of your business development. And it also sort of aligns with the Gartner hype cycle, which, if some of you are familiar, when a new industry comes in at the R&D stage, there's a lot of hype in industry about this new industry, or technology, and typically those that cannot gain traction and grow their business, that industry sort of hits a bubble and slumps down to the bottom. And those companies that really have the grit and power and will to grow their business, that also has a solid market fit, they typically go on to grow their business thereafter. Um, and we really like to invest, or everyone wants to invest in these types of companies. But it takes a lot of risk involved to invest in those companies that sort of we hope to reach there. But most of that support, at least from a Hatch standpoint, we like to identify individuals in this area. And then in terms of, I'll skip this side actually. So Hatch, we spread our efforts across these 4 stages of innovation, or at least ideation, where we are supporting university students all the way up to end of Series A. I will skip the slide because I think we're running out of time here. Joe, how are we doing on time?
Yeah, I mean, take as much time as you
Okay.
want, but yeah, we're about at the half-hour mark.
Okay. So how do we invest, or how do we do due diligence on companies? These, what is that? 8 um metrics that we look at companies. We typically focus on the team, obviously the deal, the defensibility, if the product or technology your business has, um, a competitive edge. We need the market to be substantial enough for that company to grow into and take market share. If the market is too small or non-existent, that typically doesn't work for venture capitalists. And obviously, we like to have companies that join the program with traction, but that's not an essential. If they don't have too much traction, or don't have sales yet, that's not a problem. But if they've already done a lot of R&D to develop what they're working on, that is essentially a metric that we use for traction. And then obviously your value proposition for the market, and then other things we look at is financial forecasts and how you can sell your company in the future. Okay, just a quick note, and this is sort of sidetrack, but one of the things we really look at first and foremost is if the technology or innovation that a startup is developing, it has a market that needs that innovation. And from this graph that CB Insights has developed, it shows that if your technology innovation does not have a need in the industry and there's no market for it, you are most highly likely to fail, and your company will not survive. And so we put a lot of emphasis on understanding the industry. As Hatch, we've built a massive intelligence database and have hired amazing, really talented people that know the industry very well. And so we're consistently developing insights and market analyses on the industry, not only at America level, but at a global level. So we can help our teams, our investment teams, make the best investments, and also help our companies, mature their businesses and make the right decisions on how to develop their businesses to cater for the needs of farmers and the other verticals within the industry around the world. Okay, this is kind of a snapshot of how Hatch works with companies. If you focus on the right-hand side or the middle side, this is kind of where we invest in companies. We can issue tickets up to 5 million through the Blue Revolution Fund. Whilst the accelerator program is branded as the Crest program, we can invest in companies up to 75K. In fact, this is a standard ticket that we issue to companies we invest in at the seed and pre-seed stage. Whilst all the efforts sort of on the left-hand side of this line, these are programs which are completely free for any company or individual to join. These are platforms where we support entrepreneurs to become investable later, where we can hopefully make an investment into them, or they can rapidly grow their company or idea to a level where they can get investment from other investors, or be in a much better position to get funding from either private or public sources. So if you want to know more about that, feel free to reach out and set up a call with me after this or in the next coming days. This is a quick snapshot of some of the companies that we have supported in the past. And we are consistently, recruiting new companies into our programs, whether it's an investment program or a non-investment program. And we're really proud to have helped so many companies. I think we're around 500 companies to date. And we've invested just over 72 of those. And we're actively deploying capital into more companies. So if you know of anyone who's looking for funding or needs access to our network and intelligence and obviously the rest of our team, please feel free to reach out. And so the main purpose of the other purpose of today is I'm hoping to share with you that we are actively looking to invest in startups in America here and around the world into the Crest program. The next iteration of that will be in July, where we take I think 5 to 8 companies around the world for 3 to 4 months. And it's structured in such a way that it doesn't require too much time and commitment, but it does take you to see the industry in Norway and Asia. And you get a chance to meet all your partners and customers and investors that could support your businesses going forward. And we are actively taking applications. So if those of you who know anyone who's interested to know a little bit more about, feel free to reach out to me or my team. They can help you sort of understand whether this program is a good fit for you or not. And if it's not a good fit for you, then we have other opportunities within Hatch that you can sort of take advantage of to grow your business. And then the Blue Revolution Fund I mentioned already. So for this Crest program, if you're wondering like if you are eligible for this program, you need to be a team of at least 2 people. You need to be working on an innovative technology or business in the industries that we invest in, and you need to have a sort of a product or innovation that is suitable for the market, that has a good product market fit. But if you don't know yet, you can consult with us and we can help you sort of understand that if you're not sure yet. And then we need you to have at least enough money to survive for 12 months, at least money in the bank on your own before we make an investment. And then after we make an investment, we have a lot of follow-on funding that we can then deploy into your company if you do well in the program. And then of course your business needs to be majority owned by the management. It shouldn't be a subsidiary or a different company. It's maybe owned by someone else that's not joining the program. So if you want to know more about the specific program, you can reach out to Benedict or Katrina. They'll take you through the details. And that is the end of my presentation. And you feel free to scan this QR code or take a screenshot of my contact details, and I will be more than happy to speak to you.
Awesome. That was terrific. Thanks again, Dylan, for presenting that. I'll give Dylan a minute to drop any links he wants in the chat. In the meantime, I will leave the links to our AIE webinars group, which is where the recording will be posted, as well as the AIE YouTube. I do recommend registering for the AIE and signing up for that group, just because that's where most of the discussions will happen. We've had some great conversations after previous webinars where you can connect with experts and get your questions answered. And then the last thing is I wanted to share a link to a very brief exit survey. We do these at the end of all of our webinars just to get a sense of how we can improve. But yeah, thank you everybody for coming, and we'll start with questions. Just a really quick one, Dylan, not to go down too far a rabbit hole here, but do
Sure.
you consider seawater part of the aquaculture field?
Sea water?
Yes. This was a question from Robert. Robert, if you wanted to elaborate on that question, feel free.
Okay. Yes. Hi, Dylan.
Hey, Robin. Great to
Uh,
meet you.
Nice meeting you too. I'm the guy from who received snow this morning. Yeah, seawater is, as you might know, it's a lot of could how do you say that? Could solve a lot of disease, human disease, and you got few product right now made with seawater, like nasal spray, and it's all made in Europe. There's nothing in North America, any product, and we got the best water, like Labrador seawater. Labrador Sea is part of Quebec and Labrador, and it's the best water on Earth, the purest one. So I was wondering if you will consider that. I sent my resume already to your guy, to your link at Hatch Blue. Maybe I could send you a copy on in your email. So that's why
Sure.
I was wondering, because I have to build the plant, and that's why I'm looking for investor for that.
Sure. Well, happy to have a conversation and explore, what your thoughts are and ambitions are. Um, if it's a question of whether we invest in sort of something that's maybe not associated with aquaculture, yes, absolutely we do. If it is indirectly connected to the ocean and it's utilizing resources sufficiently, or it reduces pressure on our oceans, we are most interested in that.
Yeah, because seawater, as I said, it's the first ingredient of all the rest of ocean. The water
Absolutely. Yeah.
is the basic. Okay, so
There's a company here just outside my office called Captura. They've just built a big pilot factory. I'm sure they put in about 20 million into um this plant here, and they are extracting carbon out of the ocean water. So they're pumping seawater out of the deep sea and extracting carbon and then selling the carbon from the ocean.
yeah,
Yeah.
but and there's a lot of company that extracts salt from the water to have pure water. But
Right.
I don't want to extract the salt of it. It's the salt of it who could it's compare the seawater is compare when you reduce it to the human blood.
All right. Yeah, that was a good question, Robert. Thanks for that. Yeah, we're gonna move on to the next one.
Thank
Um,
you.
the
Thank you, Joe.
next, yeah, my pleasure. Yeah. Question for Dylan from Lisa. Hatch Blue invests in technology that goes into RAS farms. Are you investing in land-based fish production assets, why or why not?
Those typically require a lot of capital, and our funds are not structured yet in a way that we are able to invest in large farms. We have invested in land-based production systems, but just at an early stage. So it's not that we're not investing, we just don't have that type of capital yet to invest in large businesses.
Yeah,
And
that's good.
if there are companies that are looking for that type of capital, we do know and are in touch with people that do have that type of company, that money. So feel free to reach out if anyone is investing in or is looking for investment for large land-based facilities.
Awesome. Good question. Next, from Anton, do you consider future environmental impact life cycle benefits as part of the decision making for investing in innovation in startups?
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks, Anton, for the question. So our funds are impact funds, and so we have a pretty heavy emphasis on making sure we invest in companies that have a net positive or net zero impact on the environment. Our fund, specifically the Blue Revolution Fund, is audited by the Nature Conservancy, which have a group, a team within their institution that helps us make sure any of our investments reach the impact KPIs that were set. And I think there's some terms and conditions that if our portfolio companies do not reach these KPIs, that Hatch is actually not allowed to reap any of the dividends or profits from these companies. So we have a very strong incentive to make sure that we are investing in environmentally friendly and positive companies. Yeah, maybe don't quote me on that. Could be wrong, but I'm quite sure that that's the case.
Yeah, thanks, Anton. And yeah, just a reminder for everybody, if you want to use the Zoom raise hand feature and ask your question directly, we'll take those too. But next up, question from Sarah: what are some successful investment projects to date that you would highlight, Dylan?
Where'd I start? There's a number of there's a whole handful of them that we're very proud of. I personally have my favorites. Those may not be the same as some of my colleagues in Hatch, but I am very proud of some, specifically some of the folks that are working in the aquaculture, or sorry, the shrimp industry, like Minotech, which are developing a device that helps farmers understand the biomass of their animals in turbid water, which typically is not possible with your normal stereo camera systems because of the turbidity. We have a company in India that's connecting all the farmers across the value chain, that has sort of created this platform where farmers can trade their product and also buy resources for their farms, which is fantastic because in those industries, especially in India, it still is today very fragmented. And this company, AquaConnect, has been able to, they've been able to connect farmers to any of people that they need to do business with much quicker and faster. So it removes a lot of inefficiencies in the supply chain. We have a similar company that does the very same thing in Indonesia called Jala, which has also been very successful. Yeah, there's a lot of companies that we're very proud of. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw one. I saw that Manolin was listed under the companies you invested in, and Tony Chen from Manolin gave a presentation on the AIE not too long ago. I'll drop his webinar in the chat. He gave a presentation on aquaculture data intelligence. They're doing some interesting stuff on analyzing salmon farms at a very granular level, which is pretty cool. Dan, I see your hand, but before I get to you, Ethan left a question in the chat. Dylan, are Hatch Blue's investments limited to North America, Africa, and Eurasia, or do you
No,
have any in South America and the Caribbean?
we as of 3 weeks ago, we're now, and please tell everyone this, we are now jurisdictionally unlimited. So we can invest anywhere in the world.
Awesome.
So if it in the past you needed to be registered in America, at least to access our pre-seed seed funding through the accelerator. But now that's not the case. You can be anywhere in the world to be able to access those funds and get into the accelerator. It's been a real big issue for at least me in the past, but now I'm happy to share that you can be anywhere to receive funding. So we started the company that way in the beginning, 2018, 19 up until I think 2020, or 2019, where we could invest all around the world, and then we had a change in structure on how our funds were set up. So then we were limited to only investing in US registered companies. And as of just a few weeks ago, that clause has been changed. So we're able to invest anyway. I will say that although we like companies to be registered in the US, they can be based and operate outside the USA. So even though your company may be in Brazil or Venezuela or Vietnam, you're still eligible for funding through Hatch.
Excellent. Dan, now you can go ahead. Thanks for waiting.
Hey, Don, thanks for presenting. I have a question about
Sure.
traction. Do you have a couple of examples of in the seed to Series A range, what you consider good traction? Specifically, if those are letter of intent sales, what do you consider in an early stage company good traction?
Great question. So that can be anything that proves to us that you're actually working on your business actively. So you can use sort of any metric there to suggest that the work that you're doing is, you're growing fast. You don't have to be having revenue, but at least you're building your product or service and developing it with industry or getting feedback from farmers or partners pretty rapidly. And the rate of traction is also important. So if you've been around for 5 or 7 years and you haven't been really growing your company properly, that's an indication of maybe these guys just don't have the grit or the motivation to work or put an effort into their company. But if you've proven that you're actively working with partners on pilot trials, for example, you have some sort of partnership or relationship with different supporting associations, that is a good indicator to us that you are actively developing your company. Yeah, and then obviously traction at the Series A, I mean, you definitely need to be having substantial revenue. Then it doesn't have to be a lot, but at least there's a trajectory that there's evidence to suggest that you could make a lot more revenue if you were able to just have a little bit of capital injection from us to reach your targets. Does that
Awesome.
answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Great.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, we have a follow-up on the land-based farms question. So you mentioned that Hatch Blue isn't really structured to invest in something that requires that much capital, but is there a specific number for how much capital is typically needed to make a meaningful investment in that sort of operation?
Can I ask who's that question from? And
It's Lisa again.
okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, it really depends on the species that you're sort of trying to grow. I mean, these salmon farms, the companies that are raising money to build those salmon RAS farms, they are, they need several $100 million to build their farms. I mean, over a period of years, of course, which is not what we're not specialized in. I mean, we do a lot of the due diligence for those projects. So in the past, many projects that have required to raise that funding, Hatch has been contracted to do the due diligence on those deals for the investors and the farms that want to raise that money. But we don't have that type of funding, at least not yet. We hope that we can raise those types of funds in the future, but for now, that's not our that's not how we structure. I'll just go back to our you could probably go to like these types of funders if you're interested in that type of money. But if it's a different type of farm, maybe shrimp or some other species that are starting small, those companies are probably raising $1 million plus to start with, and then obviously they're going to need more when they really grow and expand their business.
All right, great. Yeah. And we just have about 5 more minutes left. I want to respect everybody's time. So yeah, get your questions in now if you have any. But yeah, another follow-up one from Lisa too, which I think is a good question, is just how is Hatch Blue navigating the current trade policies and tariffs that are happening as far as the United States is concerned?
I don't have a comment on that. I think the wider team are more in tune with that.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, does anybody else have any more questions as we wrap up here? You can drop it in the chat or raise your hand.
So just to iterate, Lisa, we reading a question now in the chat box that we don't have capital to invest in land-based farms. That's not necessarily the case. We do have money to invest in land-based farms, but it depends on the size of the farm and how much money they need. Yeah, but we definitely have an investment thesis that we want to invest in land-based farms, and we are actively looking at deals on land-based farms. We're not considering the large projects just because we don't have that type of funding. At least not yet, right? Or hopefully in the future we'll have funds that could support those type of projects. But in the meantime, the way we work with large projects is through our consulting business unit.
And I guess one question that I had, Dylan, if I can take an opportunity here, is, you mentioned sort of the things that led to startups failing, as far as there wasn't a market, et cetera. But I'm wondering, on more of a macro scale, what do you think the challenges are for aquaculture startups in the United States, specifically? Like, what are the common ones that you've helped your startups navigate?
Great question. Let me go to that slide that I showed earlier. So, one of my big things is proximity to market, where startups may have an idea or an innovation they want to develop, but they're not necessarily close to any of their customers or partners to leverage questions of them quickly to get fast feedback so that they can make decisions rapidly on how they grow their business. And what we do for startups is to help them connect with people that they can get feedback fast, or much faster than startups have got in the past. So although there are a few farms in America, at least in the US, for startups to get feedback on, we actively connect these startups and teams to farmers quickly and around the world. And there's some people on the call, I think, that have had experience with that already. But yeah, that's one of the things that the challenges that companies here in the States have, is getting quick feedback on their product. Yeah, that's the first and foremost thing. And I think the rest sort of are not as important as that is access to market and getting feedback quick fast.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and that's something that aligns with what I've seen or what I've heard from people in our
Yeah.
conversations.
It's not necessarily a problem for us though, because we already connected with all the farmers. But we see before companies join or come under the Hatch umbrella, whether through our programs or other business units, that they haven't spoken to enough farmers yet. And it's mainly because they're not living or stationed near farms to get that fast feedback.
Yeah, and I think that this ties to what you're talking about with the supportive ecosystem. I think, especially in places like Maine, where I just visited, where they have such a thriving, culture of aquaculture and support organizations. I do want to reemphasize that for everybody because I think that's a great point that there is a lot of support for American aquaculture and it is an exciting industry to be part of.
Hey Lisa, before you publish anything, please reach out to me if you have any questions so we can set up a call and also go over your article. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, and anybody who has any other thoughts that they weren't able to get to, I'm going to leave a link to the funding and finance AIE group. We can continue the conversation that Dylan started on here about aquaculture funding in the US. But yeah, just want to thank you again, Dylan, and thanks everybody for joining. Dylan, any last comments?
So I guess I'll leave by saying that if you're not sure about where you fit with Hatch, or if you in a position to leverage resources from Hatch, please reach out anyway. We have a brand new website that went up. It may make it a little bit easier to navigate on what Hatch does and how we can help. But yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email. I'm more than happy to have a call with you to understand like where you would fit into Hatch and how we can help you. You don't necessarily need to be a startup or a registered business for us to help. We actively are helping companies create businesses from scratch. And yeah, even if you are working in innovation that maybe you don't feel comfortable actually starting the business yourself, we can still help you, realize your ambition in terms of trying to help commercialize your innovation where it can create the intended impact at a industry level instead of maybe staying at the research level. So feel free to reach out anytime. More than happy to help. Yeah, and we have lots of exciting things happening later this year, so please stay connected on our social media pages. We've got some big announcements coming up pretty soon, so yeah, stay in touch, and happy to have spoken to you this morning.
Awesome, Dylan. Yeah, thanks again for waking up early for us. Thanks again to everybody else. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you on the exchange.